Hello everyone, and welcome to a look ahead at World Tanks 8.7 patch, which introduces the new branch of the British tree, and that is the SPGs. This is a full tier or 10 tank tree or branch to the tree here, and they're all really different from the existing SPGs that really make them stand out. So to cover them all, we have the Lloyd gun carrier at tier 2, the Sexton Mark II at tier 3, the Birch gun at tier 4. This is of course a typo in the public test server patch notes. They're actually reversed in the patch notes. So anyway, the Bishop at tier 5, the Crusader SP at tier 6, the FV304 at tier 7, the FV208 at tier 8, the FV3805 at tier 9, and of course the Conqueror gun carriage at tier 10. So all of these tanks are really different and have their uniqueness from the other SPGs, and that comes from the fact that a lot of them carry a very large gun traverse. Not all of them carry a large one. There is a handful that have a slimmer, more typical gun traverse as opposed to some of the others, but by and large, all of them carry a very decent gun traverse, ranging all the way up to 360 degrees for one of them, with also the majority of them being about 90 degrees, give or take. There is one where it does have 360 degrees, which is of course the, I believe it is the Birch gun. Yes, the Birch gun is the one that has the 360 degrees, so you can park that thing and rotate it all around all day long, which is very useful. And of course the tier 10 has like a 90 to 100 degree gun traverse, so you have a very large range that really can keep it immobile the whole time without having to move, and also that keeps your accuracy on point. So without getting into further details about each individual one, if you really wanted to know the free experience and the credit cost from getting from tier 1 all the way up to tier 10, you'll have to do a little bit of math. I believe it was about 20 million credits and about, I want to say, a million or 2 million free experience. If you wanted to do the math, I had, they give you 100 million free experience and 100 million credits going into the test server. So if you would subtract I actually had 50,000 free experience and another 3 million credits. So if you want to do the math, I didn't really spend anything else on these tanks. So if you do the math, subtract what I have shown in the top right from that 100 million experience and 100 million credits with my differences, you'll get exactly how much it runs to equip every tank from very basic all the way up, because I threw on the gun lane drive, the rammer, and then depending on the tank, either a vent if it's an enclosed tank, which is incredibly useful that SPGs can get a vent, or camo if it's an open top tank. So do that math and you'll see exactly how much it took to fully upgrade and throw on gear for each tank, plus ammunition, plus consumables. So that gives you a rough idea of how much you'll need to save up. So again, I would have to go and look at it again. It was a while, but it shouldn't be too bad to see how much it ran to go and pick everything up. So it's going to be a pretty hefty grind. It's nothing too fancy to shy away from, but as we go into the games here shortly, we will go ahead and take a look at each individual tank and what they're capable of. So as we get underway here, I'll try and cover each tank as quickly as possible so I don't make you guys sit through too much. And first off is the Lloyd gun carriage. There's nothing too fancy about this tank. It is super tiny, so it really does make it for good hiding, which is something that we've actually noticed when we were testing these tanks. I was testing with my buddy Zaro, is that all these tanks seem to have a pretty decent camo efficiency on them, because they seem to be able to hide very well. All these tests that I was running, he was unable to spot me at these ranges where I was having to spot him manually. So even though I did have a camo net at just no percentage crew, they still are very good in terms of their ability to hide, and that may be due to their size, but they also might have a little bit of a camo already attached to them that is not in the typical stats. So that is very good to know. So as for the SPG here, it is really nothing too fancy, just standard what you would expect for a tier 2, nothing outstanding except for the fact that it is tiny. So we move on to the Sextant, which is basically a different variation of the Priest. They take out the Priest's main gun and throw in a 25-pounder, and they pretty much call it a new tank. Now, the nice thing about this is it does have a AP round in addition to HE, and that AP is very useful at low tiers, because if you're fighting at tier or one above, like what I'm doing here for these tests, you can see that the or even 2 tiers up, that the AP does significant damage if hitting properly. And with the new gun dispersion, accuracy, and everything else modifying the abilities of the SPGs, the AP, if it hits, is going to be incredible and do a whole lot of damage to different tanks. So, with that, HE and AP are recommended, and just use them interchangeably when it comes to the low tier. They won't be accessible to the higher tier and may not be recommended to the higher tier, but I do certainly recommend throwing some AP in the lower tiers, because going against most tanks, you'll see that you're going to have no problem going right through them whatsoever, and you do have the option of both, which is nice. So you can do heavy damage to lighter targets with the AP, and of course when you go against heavy targets, you switch to the HE and go from there. So here's the 360-degree turret tank I was talking about, the nice lovely Birch gun. It is a tier 4, and it of course is the only SPG to feature a complete turning turret. You can go all the way around 360. I believe the Bat Chat can also do that, but I could be wrong on that one. I don't obviously have the Bat Chat unlocked, but for the British, this is a first. You can park it anywhere and leave it and let the turret do all the turning to track targets left and right. So this is one of the major features that is brand new to the SPG front of the British, is that it can really use its gun traverse to track targets without really damaging that dispersion too much, whereas normally you would have to move your full tank. Now, something that we were testing out here, and you can see that I've been pinging left and right, is that against the KV, this thing is very ineffective. So, that is something to note, is that against heavy armored targets, the British may not be a very good choice. You may want to swap to a lighter target. Now, for the, the Bishop here, this one is a very difficult and will be very grindy SPG. The Bishop does have the one benefit of having a quick reload and a quick aim-in time, but this is the one British SPG which has no turning whatsoever in its gun mount. So this is basically a Valentine chassis with a KV-2 turret welded on top. So you would think that normally this would mean that it would have a gun traverse or a turret traverse with just slow movement, but indeed it is locked in. It has a very low gun traverse, very similar to that of the GW Tiger, at least from my experience, and in which case the saving grace of this thing is the fact that it does fire relatively quick and does aim in relatively quick, but otherwise it is not very much like the rest of the British SPGs. It does have that just very narrow aiming area, which, like I said, is not very common for that British line. Now, while you are able to get lucky, one thing I did notice, though, in this one in particular, and in the following one, is that its gun or range distance is very limited. It is about that of which its spotting distance is. As you can see here, I'm right about the AB line, and I can barely reach the edge of the capture zone on the encounter map there. So it really does play into this tank that it is very close range, and its range for its gun is not very good. So we move on from that to the, what is this, the the FV304. I think that's another mistake, because the Crusader that I mentioned earlier is actually mislabeled in the patch notes. But this tank has very good speed. It is a light SPG. So as I was saying earlier when I mentioned that the Crusader SP is the tier 6, it is indeed the tier 7. The FV304, which is this one, is the tier 6. Sorry, that is a mistake in the patch notes on their website that I have in front of me. So this tank does have very good speed to it. It is very, very tiny. You should see it compared to other buildings and, other tanks and also other objects in the game. It is as small as some cars on Himmelsdorf. Now, it does feature the exact same gun that the Bishop has, so you'll have to prepare yourself for very close range engagements, but one interesting thing about this tank is it can make a very good derp tank. As I'm going to demonstrate here, it is very fast, upwards of 70 kilometers an hour, and just its gun dispersion and range very much make it an interesting tank for up-close engagements. As you can see there, as I'm climbing the hill in Himmelsdorf, I'm just now able to reach the edge of the map. That just shows you how limited the distance is in this gun, whereas in almost any other SPG in the British tree features a very long-range gun. So it is a trade-off that this thing has, but it has a very interesting durability as it is super fast. So as we move in away from the FV, we move into the Crusader that I mentioned earlier, and that is a rather interesting tank. The Crusader here, I'm going to nickname later in a different part of this video. We'll see if that catches on. But this thing is basically a reversed M12. So if you like the M12, you'll like this tank. It is very similar in its playstyle, very similar in its gun, very similar in its layout. It is a very similar tank to the M12, and if you have experience in the M12, you'll fare very well in this thing. It has range to the entire board, so you get back from those two terrible short-range guns to having very long range. The reload is not very fancy. It's, again, very similar to the M12. The gun dispersion is very similar, but it does have a decent gun traverse, similar to the other tanks earlier. Not necessarily as nice as the gigantic 360, but I'd say it's about a 45 degree. So you'll start to get into the good gun traverses at this point in time in the British trees, or the British SPG branch, in the fact that it goes back and forth, like I said, a good 45 to slowly making your way up to 90 to 95 to 100 degrees. So this tank, it has one awesome feature. It is that it reverses very, very, very fast. Its forward movement is only 14, but it can run away very quickly, which gives it my nickname of the Brave Sir Robin tank, because Brave Sir Robin runs away, run away, Brave Sir Robin. So we move from the Brave Sir Robin tank to the FV204 Tier 8 SPG, and it is an interesting tank, but in the simple fact that it has a good gun traverse. Otherwise, it is kind of lackluster. It does have very decent splash range, but its accuracy is nothing too special, and the splash range is comparable. Like I was saying, it's normal. It's about average with any other SPG. It doesn't stand out. Its damage is pretty decent, but it does feature those AP rounds that I mentioned earlier, so it may not be too bad to equip a handful of AP rounds. I did not check the penetration rate, sadly, but its AP is, you know, just to have a few extras, because it's carrying AP in SPGs is a good idea. This thing also miraculously weighs a crap ton. As you see here, as I'm able to ram that tank, the tonnage on this thing is about 60 tons. Thus, it also has incredible armor, and that also carries on to the next tank, the FV3805. It has a decent amount of armor on the front, in addition to weighing a good ton. So it is about 10 tons less than the one below it, about 50 tons, give or take. And it has a moderate splash damage and pretty decent accuracy, but otherwise I found it to be nothing spectacular. I didn't really get into many engagements. It did take a while to reload, and it's an average aim-in time, but overall it just really didn't feature anything special. So we move on to my favorite, the Conqueror gun carriage. This thing is the modern marvel of the British SPG line, because it has a huge gun traverse. It can go almost, I would say, good 2/3 of the map in terms of its gun traverse, just because of its, if you're sitting in one corner, you really do not have to move it. I, of course, move around because that's just my playstyle, but it can really go all over the place and just do some crazy amounts of aiming. Now, this thing has the ability to one-shot most tanks in a direct hit. Its splash damage is otherwise on par if you're using the premium rounds, but slightly less than, but very similar to that of the T92. So this is like a very interesting T92 with its turret traverse. It has fantastic armor on top of it, in the fact that it can sustain lots of hits. And something to note for almost all the British, but there are a few exceptions, is that a lot of them are using howitzer gun platforms. So you'll notice that your range time is a very long but not as bad as mortars. But it will be a up and down at range. But if you're up close, you'll have a very distinct arc. If you're at range, you'll have a very flat profile for your gun. But it does actually have a nifty ability to hit behind most already safe spots rather reliably. So it's something to look out for, because it just seems to have the ability to throw rounds up and down a little more than most TDs that are out there right now outside of the mortar class. The mortar class certainly are on top. So now we swing into the last bit that I have to show here, and that is the new Russian TD, or the new Russian light that is replacing the T-52 Mark II, and that is the nice and new MT-25. I talked about this on my Facebook profile, actually, whereas it replaces it and it gets knocked up a tier, but has the same gun. It's slightly heavier, has much better turning ability, but the overall speed is maybe on par at best. And the problem is, it is a lot wider of a tank, so you're going to be a lot easier to hit, and just in general, it is a fatter tank. It looks more like a British or French tank than anything else, but it still works. One thing I'd recommend, though, at this tier is you're definitely going to need to run premium to make it effective, because it just does not have the ability to penetrate armor with that 57mm if you're going against high tiers, especially being a tier 6. The fact that you're going to be able to see upwards of tier 10, no problem. One thing, though, it does maintain that whole maneuver and fire ability. You can zoom around targets and continue to pepper them with your 2-second reload. It does not get the ability to fire its, what is that thing? It does not get the ability to have a gun or a ammo rammer, because it does feature a auto loader. So that is something that you will have to be aware of. Now, that pretty much covers all the content. I will move into one last little bit and we'll call it there. Alright, so as I wrap up here, we'll cover the rest of the patch notes, and that includes a new German premium TD, the E25. Sadly, I ran out of gold in the test server to test it out, but more or less, it is a very fast Hetzer/Stug hybrid that has the L70 gun on it. So it's a very fast firing, very decent penetrating gun, and it's a silly fast tank. But it is kind of fun. I did like seeing it out there. So it's I would highly recommend picking them up if you get the option. In addition to that, the rebalancing of the T50 has been implemented. They have reworked a few graphic details, as you've seen in some of the maps. They get a little bit brighter. Otherwise, they've added an assault mode in Marinovka. They've fixed several destructible objects that had a significant slowdown effect on tanks, is what they're going to do. They fixed the visual models for some environments. They fixed some minor issues with team balancing that appeared in 8.6, which I'm sure is the whole getting really differentiating tiers of SPGs. And of course, they extended the list of names and surnames for crew members, which doesn't really have any effect, but it's still cool. And they've also added changed the voice message from "We've got him" to "Armor penetrated." So that wraps up my look ahead at the 8.7 test patch here. Of course, you can go and find it and download it for yourself at the worldoftanks.com webpage, and I will post a link to that in the description here. So I hope you all enjoyed my look ahead at 8.7, and I hope you guys are excited for it as I am. I will catch you guys in game, and again, thanks for tuning in. See you guys later.